Hi, I'm Charla Kostelic,
Hi, I'm Heather Greitman.
and we are the co-authors of the book Sensory Processing Explained.
Yes, and today we wanted to come on and talk about some ways to make a classroom sensory friendly. So I know a lot of information is out there for parents, especially to use at home, but we wanted to specifically address classroom situation and how you can make it a little more sensory friendly, not just for the kids that are having sensory challenges, but for everybody. So we're going to talk about that real quick. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was including brain breaks in your classroom. Most kids, their limit of focus is only about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's on the high end. Most kids is probably more in the 5 to 8 minute range that they're able to kind of sit and focus on something and not break their attention. So when you get past that 15-minute mark and things are kind of getting a little squirrely and you're having to redirect kids a lot to get back on task, it's a great time to take a brain break. So there's lots of ways you can do that in the classroom. One way that I used when I was working, I'm a certified occupational therapy assistant, so I worked in the classrooms with lots of different types of kids, but I set up a sensory motor walk in the hallway next to our room. I shared a room with a special education director, and there was an empty hallway right next to us that led to outside. And so I took that opportunity. It was like, it's an empty hallway. Kids can go in here and use it when they need to. It's a great way for transitioning back from lunch and recess to go back into the classroom to go through a sensory walk. Because a lot of times when kids come in from lunch and recess, and this is any kid, not just ones that are struggling with sensory issues, they're kind of amped up because they've been out running around, having a great time, getting all that energy out. And so then when you're trying to get them back into class, they're still kind of running on those fumes from outside. And so it's a great way to kind of get them to decompress a little bit and kind of get back into focus is to do a sensory motor walk. And so we're actually providing a sensory motor walk printable that I created based off of the one I used. We're giving that away for free this week when you purchase our new course, Overcoming Sensory Meltdowns. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Anything you want to add to that, Charlotte?
Yeah, brain breaks don't have to be complicated. They can be very simple. A really good brain break is always something that crosses the midline. So if you have kids stand up and just do, a very simple crossing the midline exercise, that can be a great way. And that helps both sides of their brain to, talk to each other. And so it's not just like a physical sensory type break, but also an actual brain break. And can really help wake kids up. Those are especially good for in the morning. So just you don't have to have super complicated brain breaks. It's nice to have a few during the day that are a little bit more involved in terms of like getting the kids to want to participate, but it can just be something really simple. Or you can incorporate some yoga stretches or breathing exercises into the day. So not something that requires a lot of equipment or cost to you or a lot of pre-planning, just very simple brain breaks. So
and I think the other important thing to remember with brain breaks is if you do activities that are meant to kind of alert and reorganize, then you also need to follow that with something that's more calming. Because if you go from an alerting kind of activity that's kind of ramping them up and then you're asking them to sit down, you're not helping the situation any. So make sure whatever brain breaks you do choose that you end with something that is a little more calming, kind of getting them to that just right level where then they can sit back down and focus. Ideally, the next point we're going to talk about is alternative seating. So ideally, they're not going to be sitting all day at a desk or whatever you have. Ideally, it would be great if you can have alternative seating options in your classroom. And I know this is a thing that's getting more and more popular that you kind of see more But it's a great option for all kids, especially those with sensory struggles where they're either needing a lot more input than other kids. And so you can get that through wiggle seats. You can have an exercise ball that they can sit on. There's something else called a T-seat. It's like I'm trying to think how to describe it, but it's like one pole that kind of they balance on almost, and then the seat part kind of goes across like this. So they kind of have to hold their balance while they're sitting on it. And then just provide lots of ways for them to stand or kneel at desks. A rocking chair can be another great kind of calming thing too, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But yeah, lots of great seating options out there. If you can provide as many different options as you can in a classroom, I think that's a great thing to do.
One of my daughter's classrooms actually has banks of seating at the regular level, and then they have tables that are raised really high so that kids can actually stand at those and complete their work there. So very simple, but another great alternative.
And something else we mentioned in the course too is if you do have chairs, you can put tennis balls on the bottom of them so that they're not scraping against the floor. That's another great option. So that way it's not as disruptive if a child is getting up and moving around and they need to scoot their chair back. I know I could always tell when a classroom was getting up, you'd hear all the chairs go across the floor. And that can be kind of jarring. I mean, even for anybody. So putting those tennis balls on the bottom can be helpful for that. Another option we wanted to mention was alternative lighting. And this one is a little trickier because obviously you have to get permission for some of these things. Depending on your school, they may or may not let you do certain things with lighting. So definitely check with your school administration before you do any of these things. But I think we don't realize that those fluorescent light bulbs, and I know you've probably heard this before, but those things are not the greatest, especially in a school environment. Children who are having troubles with sensory processing, a lot of them can actually hear those lights. And so having that constant humming that they hear from these fluorescent lights in their ears can, added on top of all the other classroom, noises and sounds that they're hearing, can be overwhelming. So if you're able to turn off the fluorescent lights, I think that's a great option. Obviously, that depends on other lighting that you provide in your classroom. So you could either get lamps to put in there that have a little more of a calmer light to it. Christmas lights are a great option. And then there was another one that Charlotte and I were talking about before we got on the call that Charlotte uses in her sensory space. What were they called? I can't remember now.
We have fiber optic lights in our sensory rooms. Yeah. So
and those are pretty cool.
They're really cool, and they change colors. You can, they're controlled by remote, and I don't know how practical they are for an entire classroom, but they would be very effective in a sensory corner or sensory area in a class.
Yeah. So definitely talk to, your school administration to see what you're able to do as far as lighting. I know there's some schools, they're not allowed to have extension cords or things like that. So just check with them to see what you are able to do. And then if you're not able to turn off the fluorescent lights above due to, other lighting issues, there are some heat resistant covers that you can put over those because they're also very bright. And it's not like it's just really bright. So if you can get a cover for those to kind of diffuse the light a little bit, that can also help. And that brings us right into our next suggestion, which is setting up a sensory corner or a sensory space in your classroom. You may also have a space in your school. A lot of schools now are putting in sensory rooms. So that's another option that you can have children go to if they need to. But having one in your classroom, I think, is ideal because you can get a child into a sensory corner much quicker than getting them down to another space in the school if they're needing to have some quiet time. So we wanted to talk about some ideas to put in your sensory space. And I mentioned one of them earlier, which was a rocking chair. Or a beanbag chair is another great option, because when you sit in a beanbag, I don't know if most of us probably have had a beanbag at some point, but when you sit down into it, it almost kind of hugs you. And so it gives you that really deep proprioceptive input, which can be calming to a lot of children. And then also include, your sensory bottles, your calming bottles. Those are so easy to make. You can get an empty water bottle. I know the Voss water bottles are a favorite for sensory bottles because they just look nice. But you can fill those up with glitter. There's lots of different ways to make those. And if you do a quick search on Pinterest, or I know Charlotte and I both have sensory bottle ideas on our websites also. And then breathing cards. I think this is a great one because it prompts the kids to take those deep breaths to just kind of help calm and relax them. You can put posters up of the breathing ideas. Having books for them to look at, books on emotions and feelings would be great options. And then paper and crayons, so they can, if they want to doodle or draw or just kind of, write out their feelings, they can do that. And then you can also include some quieter brain break activities that they can do. So maybe not necessarily, the ones where they're getting up and jumping up and down, but something that they can do while they're seated in that area. And I wanted Charlotte to talk about her sensory room that she set up in her house, but it's in a closet. And so it's a small space, which most classrooms, you're going to have a small space for this. So I wanted her to share what she did in her space to kind of give you some ideas too.
Yeah, we, you don't need to have an entire room to have a sensory area. So in our house, we had an extra closet type storage space. Mm-hmm. And we converted that into our sensory room. So it includes a calm down corner that has a beanbag chair and the fiber optic light curtain that comes down like over the beanbag chair. So they're kind of hugged into the corner there. And we have books in that corner for them to read on things like emotions and managing their feelings and on mindfulness and those types of things. We also have a sensory wall. And I know that if you search for sensory walls online, they are extremely expensive to purchase. But I made ours for $25. So I'm really proud of that.
Doable. Yeah, it's completely doable. It's the time investment, of course, is a little more on that one, but I think it's definitely worth it.
It took some, it took a lot of hours, but it was very worth it. We, so that was just a cork board covered in things from the dollar store. Like there's a mop head that's really, really sensory. I actually go into the dollar store and I'm sure it must look so strange, but I'm like touching everything, all the aisles, like, you can find things in the pet section and the housewares, and you've got your like sandpaper and different textures for the cupboard liners. Those are great. And then I also went to like a home store and Home Depot and got carpet samples and flooring samples, and a lot of those are free. So we made this great sensory wall in the sensory room, and then we've got an area for fidgets. And then I also made a visual. So it's just a board that says in through your nose and out through your mouth. So it's a visual reminder for the kids on their breathing. And then we have things like lava lamps and a sound machine to play calming sounds. And so everything in there covers, like, there's things for all 8 of the sensory systems in there. We've got jewelry, we've got there's everything covered, in a small space. So it really is doable. But actually in our Overcoming Sensory Meltdowns course, we've provided printable prompts to create your own sensory corner in a classroom or at home. So a few breathing prompts for kids, and then just like a visual, our sensory corner or that type of idea for them. So we've provided that kind of thing so that you can set something up really simply. But it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right. And I think that's the thing to kind of remind everybody too is It doesn't have to be really complicated. You can just, pick a few things, maybe 4 or 5 different things to put in this space. But then your entire classroom knows that, when they're having some trouble with, emotional regulation or dealing with some sensory overload, that's their space, that they can go there and kind of decompress and self-regulate and then come back to class and be able to focus a lot better. And I'm glad you brought up the fidgets, because I completely forgot about fidgets. But yeah, that's another great thing that you can include. And I think the thing with the fidgets kind of are getting a little bit of a bad rap because of the fidget spinners lately. Yeah. And I think the main thing to say with fidgets is they are a tool. They're not a toy. And so you have to treat them that way. They cannot be distracting to the child. That needs to be something that is helping them focus. So if it's being distracting to them or even to the entire classroom, then you maybe need to come up with a different solution for the fidgets that will be good for everybody. All right, and the last one we wanted to talk about was minimizing your classroom decorations and just being very, not picky, but being very choosy about what you put up in your classroom and what types of visual inputs you're putting into the classroom. So something I would suggest that you do as far as putting things up on the wall is having visual prompts for common things that are going on in your classroom, whether it's a common activity that you're going to do every day, your routine for the classroom for the day, so that when kids come in, they can see, oh, I know first thing we need to do is this, then we're going to be doing this subject, then we have lunch. So it's kids can look and see visually what is coming up for the day. And then another great thing you can include is visual timers. This is great for transitions. Transitions are hard. A lot of kids struggle with transitions. And so anything that you can do to kind of ease those transitions with a visual is a great option, because then you don't feel like you're constantly saying the same thing over and over again and reminding kids, okay, we got to keep going, or let's move on to something else. But visually, the kids know what's coming next, and then they can see on the clock as it's counting down, oh, I have this much time left. Anything you wanted to add to that one, Charla?
No, those are great suggestions.
Okay. All right. Well, before we go, I wanted to ask Charla kind of specifically what her kids find helpful for them in a classroom situation, as far as what sensory tools they kind of rely on and what's helpful for them in that kind of environment, to kind of give you an idea of some things you could use in your classroom too.
Yeah, so my kids do use fidgets. We have some favorites that we've got the pea pod one, where they can squeeze like the little happy faced pea out of the pea pod. I love that one because it's pretty subtle. It doesn't make any noise.
Yep.
It can be carried like in their pocket. It's actually got keychain rings, so it can be attached to a backpack. It's a real favorite of ours. They actually have quite a lot of fidgets that they use for classroom and home. One thing that we use is the pencil toppers for some of the kids. And then, so they've got the spinner on them, or the little, they're almost like a screw top thing. I don't really know how to explain it, but anyway, those are helpful. And then we've a jewelry or gum or that kind of thing for kids who have more of an oral sensory issue. So definitely some of my kids need to use jewelry or gum or both. And then we do also the squeeze balls, the stress balls that you make yourself. So with balloons and flour or cornstarch, super inexpensive to make. And again, it's a fidget where it's not going to cause anybody else in the classroom any distraction. It's not noisy. And really, they don't even have to bring attention to themselves because they can have it in a pocket or inside their desk. So that's another favorite of ours. For some of my kids use their Calm Down Breathing mini book, and they have it in their backpack with them just as a visual reminder for that, breathing stuff that they sometimes need. And then another thing would be that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yes, sensory play for older kids.
Oh, yes.
I know that, in kindergarten classrooms and grade 1 classrooms and preschool, the teachers think about incorporating sensory play into things, whether it's art and finger painting, or they actually have a water table or a sand table, or sometimes they might even have themed sensory bins to go along with the unit they're studying. So that is used like very naturally and normally in younger classrooms. And it's something that tends to go away by, even second or third grade. That doesn't exist in the classroom. But now that my kids are getting older and some of them are even teens, like this is something that it's missing. It's they love it. It calms them right down. And yes, it has to be sometimes presented in a different way, because they won't necessarily want to play like, you're not going to have a 15-year-old that wants to play in like a dinosaur themed sensory bin.
Right.
You can't stick that in the classroom, but you can make Oblak as a class in science and have them like actually, feeling that and like interacting with that sensory thing. You can make your own kinetic sand. You can make cloud dough and scent it. You can, like, there are things, again, scents you have to be careful with, but that's another topic. But just like there are a lot of ways that you can incorporate sensory play into even your classroom, and for sure into your home when you have older kids or even teens. And I'm telling you, as like a calm down behavioral management type of thing, it's magic. Like it's unreal what this does to kids. And it's not harmful. Like, it's just the most amazing. It's like, I really do call it magic. It's amazing. So that's something that, I think is missing. And then the other thing I want to touch on just really quickly is kind of related to teachers, kind of related to parents. And that's just that when kids get home from school, and this is for teachers to be aware of, and for teachers to possibly talk to parents about, there are kids that are having what's known as after school restraint collapse, which is a meltdown after school, after like the buildup of sensory, for sure, the sensory overload piece for sure, but also just a buildup of emotions over the day. And when they get home into their safe space and they're not trying to like be cool in front of their friends and, or they're not trying to hold it together anymore, they're having these giant meltdowns, and parents are pulling their hair out and don't know what to do. And sensory is a big component of that. In our house, when the kids come in, water right away, which is just, meeting basic needs, and then healthy snack, and then right away into either like some kind of sensory activity or the sensory room, calm down corner, something like that. And they can decompress. So just something that parents can suggest if they hear that parents are struggling with the after school meltdowns. And really simple, like 3 steps. Super simple, and it works.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's a great tip to remember. Because when you think about it, I mean, kids are literally trying to hold it together all day, and being told, do this next, go here. And they're not able to process all that at the same speed that we are. And so then they get home, and then that's their safe space. And so they just kind of let it all out. And then, parents are like, wait a minute, what is going on here? So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's definitely something we want to remind teachers about and parents to be aware of too, as why that's happening. So real quick before we go, we wanted to mention our course that we just launched this week. It talks about all of this and a lot more. There's 20 videos in it where we go over things from sensory triggers and sensory overload to preventing those things, how to keep a sensory triggers log, how to stay calm yourself. That's, I know, a big one we hear from a lot of people that they struggle with. And so we just wanted to let you know that that is available. It's called Overcoming Sensory Meltdowns, and we're really excited about it. We know it's going to help a lot of people. And we just wanted to share that with you, and also share some tips that you can take right now and use in your classrooms. And parents, if you're watching, this is a great one to share with your child's teacher or other school administration and staff to give them some ideas to use in the classroom as well. So yeah,
thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah, I think that's it. So hope you have a great afternoon, and we'll talk to you later.